One of my favorite tools has to be stencils. Stencils are fantastic because you can add design, you can add color, you can add texture. They can become a focal point or they can be part of the background. In this lesson, I am going to show you a specific technique that I really enjoy with stencils, as well as giving you some general tips and tricks, and just some thoughts on things that I feel like work really well with stencils. So to kick it off, we're gonna use this Crafters Workshop stencil right here. Now this is what I would consider an easy to use stencil. There are different degrees of difficulty with stencils because if there are a lot of open spaces or a lot of really large spaces, when you go to apply the mediums, you may find that as you pull a medium over it, it wants to flip up or it wants to be a little bit of a pain. That's not to say you shouldn't use those stencils, it's just something good to know when you first pull out your stencil and are taking a look at it. Something like this where it's lots of nice, neat, tiny little holes is going to be very easy to use. And because it's going to be easy to use, it's going to be what we try out some different mediums with. Now, this is optional and it will depend on what kind of creating you're doing, but if you need to hold down your stencil, one way to do that is use a little bit of washi tape. Washi tape is great for this because washi tape will not stick and it will come off really easily, both off your surface and the stencil. So if desired, you can put a little bit down on the edges, but it's not necessarily a must do. It will depend. So I am going to start by showing you a couple different ideas here. I'm going to start with some ink. Ink on a stencil is a lot of fun because it can add a lot of color and be a great finishing touch or background. I'm just using a little blending tool and some distress ink. Any kind of dye ink is great with a stencil. You'll notice how I'm either tapping or gently moving along. I'm not scrubbing back and forth. You can come back in with ink, reapply ink, come back in to make some spots a little bit stronger than others. And you can go along slowly, quickly. You can use a larger blending tool if you want to cover more space. For a stencil with little holes like this, you may not need that. And you can just continue and you can change colors as well. Now you might notice I just moved that stencil a little bit. If I had had more washi tape on there, that wouldn't have moved. And that's actually why I did not put more on there, because I want to show you that it does move easily. So you're going to want to think about your creative process and you're going to want to think about what will work. Now we can blend different colors here and fill in all the spaces or just some of them. Now from here, we can move into different types of texture mediums or things that are going to have more body. The ink by itself is just going to be very flat. If we want to use more, if we want to get more texture, if we want to do more stuff, we're going to need to move into different mediums. Now, first off, here's a heavy body acrylic paint. You could use a heavy gesso. That could be a good option as well. For this, I like to apply the paint off the stencil in most cases because I don't want it to slide underneath. And paint is not going to be as heavy as some of the other mediums we'll play with. So I like a palette knife to spread it over. And for paint, I tend to use a pretty small amount. If you use a palette knife on a stencil, it works really great because you can hear there, we can scrape all the excess off so that you're only getting a little bit. If you want to build up more thickness, I would suggest getting into something such as light and fluffy modeling paste or really any of the texture pastes or modeling pastes. These are, the way I would describe them is they're very dry. They really go on nicely and they don't want to mess up. I love that about modeling paste, and if you have excess you can just put it back. Modeling paste wants to play nice. Modeling paste is probably the easiest. You can either scrape the stencil as I did with the paint so that it's more thin, or you can leave it a little bit thicker. And when you lift your stencil off, it'll be a little bit thicker, the pattern will. So that is another option. Now also from Crafters Workshop, this is a new product and it's a lot of fun. It's called Shimmering Goodness, and it really is exactly what it says. It is Shimmery Goodness. It has a very, very delicate metallic pearl finish. And one tip, if you're going to be doing a lot of different mediums, you're going to want a piece of paper towel or something to clean your palette knife. It's a little looser than the matte finish, the paste. It's gonna dry, it's gonna look more like an acrylic paint because it's got that shimmer to it and it's absolutely beautiful. I'm gonna put some of it over the top here because we're trying to do an experiment here. We're looking at all these different mediums, but you can see it'll just glide right over. It's so pretty. And this I would consider more of a finishing touch type product. There are gold pastes, there are metallic pastes, there are mousses. Any of those kinds of things would work great on a stencil similar to this. Then over here on the far side, I'm going to add some gloss gel. Now, gloss gel is a lot of fun because when it dries, it's completely clear and it's shiny. And we'll talk more about that a little later. For right now, though, I just want to show you, because it's such a nice heavy medium, if I just plop that down on my stencil, it's a heavier medium and it's a little more, it has a little more, it's a little more fluid, it's a little more wet than, say, the texture paste, but it's gonna hold up really nice. It has a really nice body to it. And that's going to be something you're gonna wanna consider. Are you looking for more heavy body? Are you looking for more texture? Are you looking for color? Are you looking for a combination of those? And not only do we have color and texture, we can combine the two, which is what I'm gonna show you next. But first, let's lift this stencil off and see our experiment. Now, it's going to look different now than when it is fully dry because all of these mediums do tend to change a little bit with the exception of the ink. So let me show you, here's another example. This one is totally dry. You can see here, this is matte gel medium versus the glossy. You can see how there's such a difference in the shine. And we have the texture paste into the shimmer. Oh, I just love how that looks. And there's really a good texture to it. It's enough that you can see and you can feel it, but it's not so much that it wouldn't work on your planners, on your scrapbooks, and on your cards. And then over here, you've got the inks. So lots and lots of options. Always with stencils, your best bet is to move slowly and carefully as you apply so that you don't end up with a big mess. If there's a little bit of overlap, if there's a little bit of a problem, that's okay. So let me show you now. This is one of my personal favorite things to do. I'm going to use a Tim Holtz stencil here. This has lots and lots and lots of flowers. And I am going to want on this stencil definitely to tape it down. I want to tape it down because I don't want it to move and I'm going to be doing a lot of different things with it here. And just put a little bit at the bottom. Now this is a bigger piece of paper than my stencil. You don't need to use a bigger piece of paper than your stencil. That just happens to be what I am working with here today. You just want to make sure you have enough paper to work with whatever it is that you're doing. So I've got that tacked down top and bottom. We don't need to do all around with one exception. If you were doing a project where the stencil was going in the middle and there was going to be more project to the sides, you would want to put some tape down so that you don't accidentally get color mediums on the sides. Now, once we're done with that, we're going to get out the Distress inks and I'm going to apply the colors all over and create kind of an ombre, kind of a fun mixed effect. Now I'm starting with a lighter color and I'm just putting it all across here. And I'm not really worrying about if everything is just so or if I have perfect coverage because the way that this works, I'm going to be coming back over several times and adding more colors. So I can always catch something. If there's something that has a mistake or that needs to be fixed, I can always come back and do that. And then I'll just keep adding more colors. This is peacock feathers and more colors. Now, because this stencil, again, this is an easy to use stencil. It's nice little shapes all cut nicely. There's not a lot of big spaces. However, because of the way this is designed, if I were to try to rub a lot, I can do it a little bit if I'm going along with the lines, but certain motions here, they wouldn't go as well for me. There would be times where I would maybe snag on something, and we want to avoid that to get the prettiest possible stencil image. But as you go along, you'll just want to continue to add some colors. I'm going to come in here with a darker blue now and add this color. I like Distress inks for this because the next step to this will be 2 parts. The next step is going to be adding glossy gel medium, and I like that the Distress inks will kind of soak into the glossy gel because they are a water reactive ink, because they react with any kind of moisture. So when I go to put some different stuff on here, it's going to react. And it's just so much fun. So very, very excited to show you guys this. Now, once we have this all set, we're gonna get out that gloss gel medium. And there's no particular place to start or thing to do. I'm just gonna get enough that I think I have enough for the whole tag, just because I want to try to reduce dipping back in with a dirty palette knife. I definitely don't want to contaminate that whole jar. I'm just gonna go over everything, and I'll know that it's all covered as long as I see no real color. As long as the color that I see is very faint and I can see that there's gel over everything. Once I see that, now I don't want to keep spreading back and forth. I want to try to avoid that because I don't want the colors are starting to pick up. They're starting to come in. This is starting to get a tinge of blue. So I don't want any more mixing going on. So I want to go ahead and stop. If you wanted more mixing, if you wanted to use that for more blending, you could certainly continue. And then before this dries, we want to lift this up. You can see it's not going to look like much yet. And your stencil, you always want to wash that gel medium right off your stencils. It's not going to look like much yet, but as it dries, it's going to look more like this. The Distress ink is going to continue reacting with that glossy medium, and it's going to pick up and kind of move around and create its own wonderful, beautiful mixes. And it's just such a fun and easy way to add both color and texture to a project. Now, what could we do with this? We can do anything with this. This can become a background. This can become part of a card, a tag. Maybe cut this out from my next Project Life scrapbook page and use it with a title. There's so many things we can do with this. What I did with mine is I cut it into pieces. And you can see here how it goes from dark pink up to red. I just chopped this into pieces and framed it. And I just love how easy that is, how much fun, and how many options. Just some color medium and maybe some various texture mediums, plus a stencil, you can get so many different looks for your projects.